Secret Archive of Udmurtia, a cursed place. Few people remember, the current building of the State Council of the Udmurt Republic, formerly the Regional Committee of the CPSU of Udmurtia, stands on the site where the city morgue was located until the 1980s. Why was the morgue hastily demolished? Why was the grey multi-story building of the State Council constructed here? Strange neighborhood. Elderly residents of Izevsk, who lived near Central and Karlitskaya squares in the 70s and 80s, can confirm that the unassuming one-story wooden barrack that served as the city morgue was right next to the then operating Maternity Hospital No. 3. It was a slightly strange neighborhood. One building brought life, while the other dealt with death. The old-timers grumbled, claiming it was a bad place to live, that people should not give birth and die in the same vicinity. But as always, no one listened. The God-fearing Orthodox would shake their heads, muttering that it wasn't right, that something bad would surely happen. The morgue was a source of negativity, black energy, and all that. Working there was always an unpopular job, much like that of an executioner. No one ever brought flowers or boxes of chocolates for the morgue workers. Secret payments slipped into the pockets of their coats were the only form of appreciation. Money for being more careful with the bodies, for touching up, for powdering, for being attentive and compassionate. The morgue shared space with forensic experts and was attached to the First Republican Hospital, which, until the late 80s, was located on the grounds of the current Children's Clinic, nestled in a park area between Pushkinskaya and Komunarov streets. So, the sad institution and the maternity hospital remained neighbors, until something extraordinary occurred. The dead witch disappeared from the morgue. Among the morgue workers was a young man named Misha, who was listed as a guard. He was a student and terrified of dead bodies, so much so that he would convulse at the sight of them, but having entered this peculiar line of work, he had to endure. The night shift suited him well. He had a room where he could write notes, listen to the radio, and smoke without stepping outside, followed by a daytime shift. There were only two guards, old man Matvich, who lived nearby, and brought a quarter-liter of vodka, some pickles, and a boiled potato with him for each shift, and Misha, the student. Their duties included patrolling the building's perimeter at night to prevent theft, although thefts were rare, especially from the morgue, responding quickly to the front door's demanding, shrill ring. It was common for the on-duty forensic expert to come by at night and keeping the refrigerator where the deceased was stored in order. The perimeter was hardly patrolled. The guards responded quickly to calls, and only Matvich looked into the freezer, as per his job description. He would unlock the tight, galvanized door, squint from the bright light, and inhale the smell of formalin with his red, alcohol-stained nose. He would then stamp his feet thoughtfully, gaze at the shelves filled with the dead, lock the door, and shuffle off to his closet for another drink. Misha the student never dared to look into the morgue, not once. He found it frightening and disgusting. Yet one night, he overcame his fear. That evening, they brought in a witch from the eastern settlement. The morgue orderlies discussed her in the smoking room all night, sharing tales of the old woman who had lived in Izevsk after being driven out of her northern Udmurt village for her witchcraft. They claimed she knew herbs and spells, could remove or cast curses, and even flew on a broomstick. People flocked to her, paying for appointments, and it was rumored she had almost 100,000 rubles sewn into her pillow. The witch's death was just as strange. Her hut burned to the ground, supposedly set on fire, leaving no embers behind. Yet, the old witch was unharmed. This fact piqued the interest of Misha. How could she have escaped the fire? That night, he decided to sneak into the morgue to check on her. Indeed, there she lay in her colorful Udmurt dress, a necklace glimmering faintly on her chest, her hands folded oddly, not in the usual position of the deceased. Intrigued, Misha closed the door and returned to his room to rewrite his notes under the lamp. Suddenly, past midnight, the doorbell rang. Misha, dozing off, heard the doctor on duty, sleeping just behind the wall, get up to answer it. Later, he would testify during the investigation. I opened the door to find a girl in a white coat standing there. She said she was from the maternity hospital and her name was Katya. Her grandmother had been brought in yesterday and she asked to be let in to say goodbye before her shift ended. Then the guard arrived. I went back inside. They talked for a moment. I think they were arguing. Then I got a terrible headache. I don't remember what happened next. I just went to bed. Misha let the girl in and took her to the morgue. What happened next remains a mystery. The following morning, the guard was found hanged in the closet. The morgue medic on duty was sound asleep. They thought he was drunk, but eventually realized he was completely sober, albeit in a stupor, and the witch's corpse had vanished from the morgue. Secrets of the investigation. When the morgue workers arrived for their morning shift, they found the door unlocked, just closed. From the testimony of the senior forensic expert, as usual, I went into my office, changed my shoes, and put the kettle on. No, I did not notice anything unusual. I looked in the guard's closet to ask for sugar. Yes, I saw it right away. Then I called right away. The duty officer, he was asleep as usual. No, I could not wake him. No, I don't suspect anyone. The investigative team arrived shortly after. They examined the guard's body, which had been hanged in an unusual manner. There was no chair nearby, and the student was found clutching an empty container of formaldehyde. The room was tidy, but a distinct smell of something burnt lingered in the air. The doctor on duty was unable to provide any clear explanations. During the inspection of the freezer section, one body was discovered missing. A search dog was brought in, but yielded no results. Initially, the dog ran energetically around the morgue building, but upon entering the room, it lay down on the floor, buried its muzzle in its paws, tucked its tail in between its legs, and howled mournfully. Misha was removed from the noose and placed in the same freezer. Matvich was summoned and given instructions. The next morning, a visibly intoxicated Matvich, swearing and cursing he had not slept a wink all night, made excuses for the mysterious disappearance of the second corpse. The body of Misha the student had vanished from the morgue. This triggered a flurry of activity. Investigators established that a girl named Katya did indeed work at the neighboring maternity hospital. It turned out that the grandmother, who had died under strange circumstances, was a relative of Katya's. They wanted to interrogate her, but she quit that very same day and never returned to work. It became apparent that Katya, the witch, and the guard Misha all hailed from the same village in the Yukamensky district. The investigators traveled to this remote village, hidden deep in the woods, to inquire about the grandmother. The locals were tight-lipped, turning away as if gripped by fear, leaving the investigators with little information. Then, Matvich experienced a breakdown. Initially, they suspected delirium tremens. He suddenly embraced religion, never parting from his icon day or night, and even gave up drinking and smoking. He spoke incessantly about demons. Matvich was prescribed injections and sedatives, and the case of the suicide of the city morgue guard was quietly filed away in the archives. Gradually, things returned to normal. New guards were hired. However, a month and a half later, on the 40th day after the student's suicide, another unsettling incident occurred in the morgue. It is no secret that there are cursed places on Earth, scientifically known as geopathogenic zones. Traditionally, no housing is built in these cursed areas. Udmurtia stands as an exception. The current building of the State Council is situated on the site of the former city morgue. Strange, inexplicable events unfolded within that morgue. In the last issue, we reported on the mysterious disappearance of a witch's body from the morgue, a woman who had died under enigmatic circumstances. Poltergeist. In the early 80s, the concept of a poltergeist was virtually unknown. Ghosts, flying objects, and flaming phenomena were dismissed as nonsense. Initially, the bizarre events occurring in the city morgue, the unexplained disappearance of 2 corpses, were not taken seriously. Who knows what howls echoed through the night? The wind, perhaps, or drafts. So what if someone caused a ruckus in the morgue? Surely, the guard must have been drunk, searching for alcohol. As for the paper suddenly catching fire, that was simply due to careless disposal of cigarette butts. And why were the bodies in the morgue not in their places and arranged in such odd poses? Perhaps if the guards drank less at work, they wouldn't see things that weren't there. However, the night watchmen grew increasingly anxious, demanding a salary raise for their hazardous work. Staff turnover skyrocketed. No competent guard could withstand the unsettling atmosphere of the city morgue for more than 2 weeks. Consequently, the morgue began hiring even the most extreme alcoholics. This led to disorder, jeopardizing property security and safety. These drunks, of course, seldom conducted rounds. They showed up late, left the premises in disarray, and yet they never filed complaints with management. A typical night saw them stumble into work, barely able to stand, prop the door open, down a shot of medical alcohol, and then drift back to sleep. A sober person would have gone mad from the chaos unfolding in the morgue. All night long, dreadful groans filled the air, along with shrill and deafening laughter. It was said that the old witch, whose body vanished after her beautiful granddaughter's visit, roamed the halls alongside her, Katya, the midwife, who had no intention of dying. Meanwhile, the ghost of the hanged student, Misha, would appear in the closet, glowing with an eerie, flickering light. His eyes were wide open, fixed on you in silence, and he would reach out a hand, so pitifully. In the morning, the staff would have to clean the morgue, scrubbing the floors with bleach, and rousing the day's guard, sending him on his way. Such disturbances did not happen every day, but at least once or twice a week, they were a certainty. There were also lulls, periods of quiet that could last a month, only to be followed by another wave of turmoil. The brutal death of a thief-in-law. On the 40th day following the mysterious disappearance of the witch's corpse and the hanged student guard from the morgue, a severely mutilated body was brought in. The man had been butchered, cut up and down, leaving him unrecognizable. Rumors spread that the victim was a notorious thief who had met a brutal fate at the hands of his criminal associates for breaking their code. Identification of the body took a considerable amount of time, and even after it was established who the deceased was, no one came forward to claim him. This incident reignited the chaos surrounding the witch. Fires erupted almost daily, all originating from the morgue. The source of the fire was baffling. There was nothing flammable in the building. The stench of smoke overpowered the usual odor of formalin, causing the guards to become increasingly agitated, prompting them to demand hazard pay for their troubling work conditions. One guard quit abruptly, another fell into a drunken stupor, and the third was sent off to a psychiatric hospital. It was the same night that the thief's body was charred beyond recognition. The following morning, a terrible stench emanated from the refrigerator. When the door was open, acrid smoke rushed out, and the body lay blackened within. How could this have happened? Who was responsible? Why did this occur? One guard, trembling in fear, huddled in a corner, striking himself as if in a fevered state. Strong men in white coats arrived, taking the panicked guard away. No one ever saw him again. The official reason given for the demolition of the dilapidated morgue building was a collective complaint from the staff regarding the horrific work conditions. Their patience had run out. They cited issues like drafts, freezing temperatures in winter, and a leaky roof. Meanwhile, the employees at the nearby Republican Clinical Hospital had moved into a new, modern facility that included a morgue. Management agreed to a building inspection for the sake of order, scheduling it for the following day. The workers had much to point out, but the inspection occurred in the evening. A commission of important figures, donning briefcases, hats, and ties, made their way through the morgue corridor, holding their noses in disgust. Look here, they were shown. The roof is leaking. This corner has sunk. A pipe is bursting. The officials exchanged nervous glances at the morgue door, whispering, "Is it true what they say about what's inside?" The doctors chuckled knowingly before opening the heavy door. What lay within was unimaginable. It was an autumn evening, darkness settling in, and a strong wind howled outside. Suddenly, the commission and workers bolted from the morgue, rushing out in terror. They were only given 24 hours to evacuate, and the very next day, 2 bulldozers arrived. By nightfall, the building was reduced to rubble. A heavy snow fell that evening, blanketing the area. Oddly, where the morgue once stood, the snow melted away instantly, leaving behind a stark black oval that persisted until the depths of winter. We are ours. We will build a new world. The site where the old city morgue once stood remained empty for nearly a year. Nothing grew there, not a single tree or bush. The locals avoided this area, shrouded in an unsettling reputation. However, in spring, construction commenced a short distance away as workers began digging a pit and driving piles, signaling the start of a significant building project. The regional party committee in Izevsk needed a prominent location for their new facility. While there were numerous potential sites, the center of the city was ideal. They examined various options, ultimately deciding against disturbing the historic buildings of the nearby weapons arsenal. But what lay beneath the ground? The former city morgue. After consulting with their comrades in Moscow, it was made abundantly clear to Comrade Merisov that the party did not entertain any superstitions. They strongly recommended that construction proceed on that very spot, insisting it be done quickly for an anticipated grand opening ceremony. Though hesitant, the team moved the construction site slightly to the side, thinking this precaution might shield them from any lingering curses. Yet, this minor adjustment did little to alleviate the troubles that befell both the builders and future occupants of the new CPSU Regional Committee building. Big construction site. The capital's communists were delayed in their plans to cut the ribbon at the new Regional Committee building. The construction progressed at a sluggish pace, far slower than typical projects of such stature. The delay was not due to financial constraints. Funds for such endeavors were typically allotted without hesitation. At the construction site, a foreman and an engineer trudged through the mud, exchanging crude remarks while grappling with the same directive to build quickly and efficiently. Yet each man interpreted this high party mandate differently, and both sensed something was amiss. Workers began openly referring to the site as a cursed place. Despite being moved 20 meters from the old morgue, the alleged curse still lingered. As the workers excavated the pit, the machinery broke down twice. Injuries occurred among the crew, and the foreman succumbed to a week-long drinking binge. While pouring the foundation, a fire erupted in the construction trailer, barely being contained in time. After completing the first and second floors, a mysterious leak emerged in the basement. Initially, it was just ordinary water, but despite repairs, puddles kept reappearing, eerily resembling blood. As they neared the completion of the roof, disaster struck. A sudden hurricane struck the site, toppling a crane. The heavy structure crashed down precisely where the morgue's autopsy room had once been. Fortunately, the incident occurred on a day off, and no one was injured. The veteran workers murmured among themselves, "This is a damned place. We should invite a priest from the church." They contemplated this suggestion several times during construction, and even after the building was handed over to the communists. However, the status of the project prevented any such ritual, leaving a lingering sense of unease among those who toiled there. State acceptance. The new facility had to be completed by November 7th, no later. The construction of the building progressed with great difficulty. As they moved into the finishing stages, strange issues began to arise. The ceilings and walls seemed to rebel against the fresh coat of paint, requiring them to be re-whitewashed 3 times. Each time, the contours of an old woman's evilly wrinkled face and the silhouette of a hanged man appeared through the layers of fresh whitewash. Just as they thought they had resolved the whitewashing issues, a new plague struck. Glass began to crack on several floors simultaneously. No one could determine the cause. However, the foreman, observing from the street as glaziers worked to replace the shattered panes, noticed something peculiar. The cracks formed diagonally, almost as if someone had crossed out the new building with their thumb, leaving behind unmistakable fingerprints on the glass. "They didn't call the priest in time," he muttered, cursing and spitting over his shoulder before awkwardly crossing himself in a desperate gesture of protection. Despite the swift replacement of the glass, the plumbing systems functioned properly, but the electrical wiring was a disaster. On the 6th and 9th floors, the fuses frequently blew. Later, when the facility was officially accepted and the caretaker began affixing nameplates to the offices, it became apparent that those marked with the numbers 6 or 9 experienced the highest frequency of burnt-out light bulbs and malfunctioning electrical appliances. On the morning of November 7th, the entrance to the new Regional Committee building was adorned with a bright red cloth, a podium had been erected, and preparations were underway for a rally. The air was electric with anticipation for the arrival of high-ranking officials from Moscow who were to inaugurate this significant facility in Udmurtia. The first to take the podium was the primary communist leader of the Republic. His speech was both solemn and succinct, lasting about 20 minutes as he recounted the unprecedented success of industry and agriculture in Udmurtia. He concluded with a brief affirmation of his loyalty to the CPSU, delivering everything as expected. Following him, lesser-ranking communists took their turns at the podium, each speaking for an even shorter duration. As the weather took a turn for the worse, what had started as a warm sunny morning transformed into a snow-laden chill by 11 o'clock. The wind picked up, nearly toppling the banner that read, "Long Live." 5 men leaped to stabilize it, their efforts commendable but futile against the gusts. When the esteemed guest from the capital stepped up to address the crowd, announcing, on this significant day, a sudden gust of wind snatched his ceremonial reindeer hat from his head. It soared through the air, making a circuit around the podium before landing, upside down, at the entrance, resembling a beggar's hat, waiting for alms. No one could have predicted that the curse of a simple old woman from a remote village would sow such chaos. Although the morgue where the old woman's body had once been received was long demolished, and a new building now stood in its place, the regional committee of the CPSU of Udmurtia, the troubling issues persisted. Party holiday. The meeting was a disaster. The hat of a high-ranking official from the capital had been blown off, right in front of everyone. The Muscovite grunted in annoyance, casting a stern glance at his entourage, who quickly snatched up the cap, shook off the snow, and tucked it behind their backs, pretending nothing had happened. After the initial embarrassment, the event proceeded according to the well-rehearsed plan. The ceremonial ribbon was cut, applause erupted, and invitations to the banquet were extended. The banquet unfolded without incident, though an air of unease lingered. The capital's authorities implored their host to extend their stay for at least another day. "We'll take you to the Weapons Museum, organize a top-class hunt. We'll do this for you, we'll do that for you. Just stay until the morning." But the dignitaries remained firm. "It's time to go. We have matters to attend to." The local communists were despondent. "You turned down their hospitality and didn't stay until morning like usual," one lamented. "There must be a reason for this," another speculated. "He probably took offense. I hear he's very sensitive." "Sensitive and vindictive, we're doomed," someone exclaimed. "Oh, come on. Quit whining like old women at a funeral. Let's go have a drink instead." The suggestion was met with unanimous agreement. They celebrated until midnight, but then things took a dark turn. Suddenly, the lights in the banquet hall went out, plunging everyone into darkness. A chilling howl filled corners of the room, freezing the blood in the veins of even the most hardened atheists. Panic erupted as dishes rattled off the tables and choice curses filled the air. The wives of the officials screamed, and attendees stumbled about in the darkness, bumping into one another, falling and knocking over chairs and salads. Some, in desperation, took refuge under the tables, secretly crossing themselves. The chaos ended as abruptly as it began. The animalistic howling ceased, and the lights flickered back on, revealing the devastation left in its wake. The priest was eventually summoned, though quietly. Surprised by the invitation, he arrived with a group of tall monks, clearly nervous and scanning their surroundings. Just then, the local plumber burst in without knocking. "Mikhailich, our sewer has burst on the 6th and 9th floors. The old woman is raging again." While the plumbers grappled with the rebellious sewage system, the priests were given a straightforward, military-style briefing on their task. Understanding their assignment, the priest promised to provide qualified assistance. "It will take time and equipment. Help us, dear father. We'll pay for everything. Just tell us what you need. We'll get you any special equipment." The equipment turned out to be a small black velvet bag. Where do we start? The entire procession ascended to the top floors, selecting a special day for the exorcism when all the regional committee employees were off. The priest crossed himself dramatically and began to pray. Meanwhile, all his assistants deftly arranged several mysterious objects on the table. The only familiar item was unmistakably the Bible. The priest dipped a strange brush-like object into a bowl filled with a transparent liquid, which he poured from his bag. After crossing himself once more, he raised his hand and swung the brush, preparing to douse the walls of the regional committee with holy water. The communists had resorted to inviting the priests to their temple to drive out the evil spirits. However, they quickly realized they could not complete their task in a single day. The efforts to cleanse the building of demons continued. By the time they reached the 7th floor, the priests had run out of holy water, and their exhaustion was palpable. Their eyes were dull, and sweat poured down from their faces. Fighting evil spirits was no easy task. They requested a timeout, insisting they would return the following day to finish the job. "Have mercy, brothers. Please don't abandon us." But the clergy remained resolute. "We're tired, Father. Please don't blame us. There's too much darkness here. Expect us tomorrow morning. We will come back." They left, crossing themselves frequently along the way. The next morning, the strange procession reappeared at the doors of the Udmurt Regional Committee of the CPSU. The quartermaster, the chief plumber, and the secretary of the ideological department were waiting for them. The police officers on duty shrank away into a corner as the entire group entered the mirrored elevator, heading to the 6th floor. There, the ceremony resumed. Holy water poured into a bowl, the censer began to smoke, and the priests muttered their prayers, and so it continued throughout the entire floor, with a meticulous, cabinet-by-cabinet cleansing. However, the 6th floor behaved strangely and restlessly. Electrical appliances flickered on and off by themselves. The sewage system howled, doors creaked ominously, and objects fell off as if disturbed by unseen forces. The priest struggled against the mounting chaos. It was even more difficult for the policeman on duty when Sam arrived. He had a reputation for swift punishment and did not tolerate any nonsense. Half an hour after his arrival, the priests found themselves unceremoniously expelled from the sacred walls of the regional committee. The complete cleansing of the evil spirits remained unachieved. Then the members of the regional committee gradually dispersed, leaving their offices to be occupied by Komsomol youth and timid new businessmen. The era of wild capitalism had arrived. Amid the nationwide chaos, few cared about the strange happenings in the regional committee building. The only one who noticed this peculiar situation was Alexander Barrett. His commercial firm occupied 2 offices on the 6th floor of the regional committee building, specializing in video sales. Barrett was doing well, very well in fact. His firm, Art Video, thrived on selling VCRs assembled in Yekaterinburg to the Moscow region. In addition, he was raking in substantial profits from the infamous Lombard mortgage. Barrett lived comfortably, but sometimes, during rare drinking bouts, he drank infrequently, but with intention. He would remember an old woman. Ultimately, Barrett met a grim fate. Initially, he went into hiding from law enforcement, who were on the hunt for him. They searched tirelessly until they finally located him in Kiev, a corpse burned beyond recognition. By identifying his dental records, they confirmed that the charred remains were indeed Alexander Barrett's. After his death, the 2 offices his company had occupied remained empty for 6 months. No one dared to claim them, not even at the lowest rental rates. Passers-by at night reported seeing eerie shadows moving in the windows of the vacant offices, despite knowing no one was there. In the early 90s, the regional committee building had become a refuge for former Afghan veterans. The devil himself seemed untroubled by them. These local war veterans took up residence on the so-called 0th floor, enjoying their newfound freedom. However, after a year and a half, they were forced to vacate, either due to objections from the owners or their own decision to leave. Rumors circulated that after a particularly wild drinking session, 2 of their comrades had gone missing. It was perilous to roam the basement. Fortunately, the upper floors, still blessed by the priest, remained peaceful. There, the remnants of the Republic's communist stronghold continued to live and work until an order came down from the very top. Everyone underground. About 20 or 30 communists gathered at the regional committee, all from the leadership. They assembled quietly and privately to discuss their agenda for the day. Each member received registration cards as their party cards were flipped through. "That's it, brothers," Peter Semyonovich announced solemnly, wiping sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. "Hide everything. Hide it until better times." Judging by the expressions on the faces of the future underground members, it was clear that these were not the best of times. They pulled a bottle from the box and organized a modest spread. Thankfully, they still had some supplies. They settled in, drinking silently and smoking in the restroom. Another round was downed, snacks were shared, and they resumed smoking. As darkness fell, the alcohol began to take effect, and they erupted into song, belting out lyrics at the top of their lungs. Then, as if commanded by some unseen force, the lights abruptly went out. At the same moment, snow began to fall outside, and a fierce wind picked up, unleashing a blizzard that sent a chill through the gathering. Suddenly, a low droning hum began to rise from beneath them, a noise that no one could explain, almost like a heartbeat coming from the floors below. The men exchanged uneasy glances, and a few shuffled nervously in their seats. The bottles, nearly emptied, rattled slightly, moving of their own accord toward the edge of the table, as if compelled by an unseen force. The hum grew louder, merging with the wind outside to create an unearthly melody. Someone struck a match, and in its brief flare, they saw something that they would never forget. The faint outline of a wrinkled, malevolent face pressed against the frost-covered window from the outside, glaring in at them. Just as quickly, it was gone, but a cold dread sank into each man's heart.